quicker and quicker with every passing year, the United Kingdom is ceasing to be an English-speaking country. That is not to say that you can't see English road signs. That's not to say that you can't go down the shops. That's not to say that call centres don't speak English. But the number of children and young people who are now English second language, that is to say their first language, the language they're most comfortable in, the language they use most often, is not English. The number of those kids in some parts of Britain has reached 1/3. Yes, 1 in every 3 young people at school in certain parts of the United Kingdom now do not speak English as their first language. I'm going to go through all of these statistics using Glasgow as a case study and having a look at what's gone on there. Hello everyone, this is Andre Walker. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe, but more importantly, please do consider a donation to Patreon Fund. I'm wearing the glasses and I've got to kind of put them down like this so I don't reflect the lights, simply because I'm going to read a big load of statistics to you. Don't worry, the video will not be heavy. But let's start off with really the simplest statistics of them all, which is to say the actual number that was put out today is that 28.8% of pupils in Glasgow are English as an additional language, what we used to call ESL, English second language. That is a total of 20,717 out of a total population, school population that is, of 71,957. The number of people leaving Glasgow, by the way, is going up, and the people coming in is going up as well. And so, of course, what that means is they're expecting Glasgow to add 10% to its population in the next couple of years. That will be predominantly from third world migrants. So, okay, so what's this mean? Well, first of all, the problem is, it's really hard to categorise how people are in terms of their level of English language, if they're English as an additional language. The reason is because, you know, a 4-year-old comes into school and they can learn English relatively quickly. We know there's a large issue with people who predominantly speak Urdu when they go to school. That's something that has been established in Lancashire and Yorkshire for quite a long time. Those kids do tend to learn English relatively quickly. But of course, what it does mean is if you're in some of the poorer areas, because obviously migrants do come to poorer areas, then your child goes into school raring to go and is in a class of children where maybe 40 or 50% of them can't speak English at all. And that is something that's going to hold back their development. And we know from what took place with schools and COVID that holding children back can lead to significant departures in the wealth between the rich and the poor. What I mean to say by that is, by closing the schools during COVID, the average working class child ended up £100,000 over their lifetime worse off. That is to say, they will earn £100,000 less during their lifetime than their middle class colleagues. Of course, the problem that we also have with these areas is that 66% of those people who are granted asylum or refugee status in the United Kingdom, 1/3 of them 66% of them never, ever, ever get a job. So what very often has happened is the Scottish Government and indeed Glasgow City Council are quoting the number of people coming to Glasgow of working age, saying that that is a good thing for the economy. It's not. And also remember, and this is another interesting statistic that Dave Atherton came up with, really great bloke, by the way, Dave. Please do follow him on Twitter. What he said is, obviously, the amount that you cost to the taxpayer varies depending on your age. So fairly obviously, somebody aged 18 probably doesn't cost a great deal at all because, particularly if they're in employment, but somebody who's an unemployed 35-year-old from, say, Syria will be huge because they may have 5 children all in school. They've got a wife who's on benefits as well. They need a house for 7. And so with them, you need to earn around £40,000 a year in order for you to be a net contributor to the British taxpayer. It would be much lower for other people. And so we're finding now that these cities are not only being taken over, but they're being taken over by people who aren't adding anything economically to that city. And so you have the drain on resources. And let's go now to the NHS. And I think the NHS is extraordinary because what the Greater Glasgow and Clyde NHS trusts say is that what they're now doing is they're providing interpreters to enable people to understand what treatment's going on. And the benchmark is that if you are either more comfortable in a foreign language or you need to speak a foreign language, then you will get that translation service. And they're spending an absolute fortune on those interpreters. And they say it's vital for access to healthcare that somebody can speak the native tongue that you are familiar with. Well, what is going on here? Well, we've seen that there's Nelson in Lancashire, which is now an 80% Muslim town. And we've seen, of course, the 70% or 7 out of 10 social houses going to non-British people who were not born in the United Kingdom. There is now, without a doubt, an accidental, though perhaps not deliberate, strategy of ethnic cleansing. I always say that my friend of mine talks about how ethnic cleansing takes place in Eastern Europe. How you bring people in, prioritise them for housing, prioritise them for education, make sure they're the ones on the TV, not the indigenous population. What other things do you do? You knock down their statues, you ban their history, and all of these sorts of things. And I think that priority on housing, though, is the most important one of them all. And I'm not saying to you that this ethnic cleansing or this great replacement or anything is a deliberate strategy by the British government. I think it's just us being overly welcoming. And when I say overly welcoming, you go, ugh, what does that mean? Well, because of our desire as British people to be so open and welcoming to people from abroad, what we're doing is we're prioritising them over and above our own people. Charity begins at home, and I often say that the solution to Syria's problem, the solution to Libya's problem, is not to empty Syria and Libya of all of these people, and yet that's what's coming over. And of course, there is another problem here. It tends to be young men who are coming over to the United Kingdom as refugees, as asylum seekers, and indeed as the boat people. But when they get indefinite leave to remain, they are going to start to bring their families, their children. And they're not fleeing a genuine war, but of course what they are doing is preparing the way for that mass immigration, which will come later. I estimate, well, I mean, it's hard to estimate, isn't it? 1.7 million. It's the total number of people who are on the road to indefinite leave to remain in the next couple of years. That figure means that if they all bring, say, 5 people with them, which I think is a realistic figure, then that would add an extra 10 million to our population. It would be 10 million who would be principally from the Islamic world. Not that that's a particular problem. It doesn't bother me what your religion is. What bothers me is that they're not going to become Christian when they get here. Did Andre say that? Yes, I did. I think that you have to adopt the local religion and local customs of the areas that you come to. Otherwise, you just end up like Lebanon, where the Christian population has been completely pushed out. And I believe that we have a right to a homeland. Glasgow ought to be principally for Glaswegians. Britain ought to be principally for the British, just as Pakistan ought to be for Pakistanis. That is the only fair way round. But we've got to ask ourselves now, when 66% of refugees and asylum seekers never, ever, ever work in the United Kingdom, when a third of our schools are not, our pupils are not principally English speaking, when you have a situation that, 1% of the British population leave every year to be replaced by migrants from the third world. As I said, by the way, a statistic I gave you the other day, so 1% of the British population leave every year. That means that over 3 years, one person from your class at high school will leave. And you think, well, that's not a lot. No, okay. But then when you go to 12 years, it will be 4. 25 years, it will be 8. Over your working lifetime, it will be a third of the entire population being replaced by new people coming in. And of course, under the doctrine of multiculturalism, we will never ask those people to integrate. What we will do instead is spend all of this money on teaching assistants to teach them how to speak English. We will spend all of this money attempting to get them to get translation services for the NHS. Money being poured down the drain on people who add nothing economically but detract significant culturally, because they are not people that want to fit in with a Western style of life. People who don't support freedom of speech, people who don't support freedom of religion, people who don't support your right to live your life in the way that you've lived previously, and people who wish to create what I've talked about on this channel before, those tribal areas that now adopt the religion the traditions, the language of whichever third world country somebody came from. And I've always said it's like a seesaw. Yes, these people will become more culturally enlightened when they come to Britain, but Britain will become less culturally enlightened as a result of the influence that they bring in. Please do donate to the Patriot Fund below. Until next time, goodbye.